Hi, everybody. I'm Bob Bowman, Editor-in-Chief of Supply Chain Brain, and I want to welcome you to this presentation on Empowering Tomorrow's Planners, Essential Skills for Success, third in a series of webinars presented by Gartner. Quick reminder, there will be an audience question and answer session at the end of this presentation. Audience members are encouraged to submit their questions at any time during the presentation by clicking on that Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. Now, we are in a time of increased availability and deployment of technology to support and automate planning processes, and the role of supply chain planners needs to evolve along with that. The competencies and skills that were important before are no longer relevant. So today, we're going to discuss the evolution of the planner's role, upskilling strategies, and how to create a safe learning environment. Before we get going, though, I do want to remind everybody about the upcoming Gartner Supply Chain Planning Summit. That's December 3rd through 4th, 2024 in Denver, Colorado. Lots of things to learn at this one. You will be able to create forward-looking processes to optimize demand, supply, and product portfolio planning, improve business performance, utilize data and analytics with cross-functional conversations and qualitative judgments. We look forward to seeing you in Denver at the Gartner Supply Chain Planning Summit 2024. Learn more at gartner.com/supply chain planning. With that, I want to introduce our speaker for today. Cristina Carvalho is Senior Director Analyst with Gartner. Cristina helps Gartner clients to develop and transform their supply chain planning processes and organization. She's passionate about learning, working with multicultural teams, and helping Gartner clients develop outstanding business performance. Welcome, Cristina.
Hi, Bob. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here today.
And thank you so much. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Cristina, for the presentation. Take it away.
Thank you. So today we're going to talk about empowering tomorrow planners, as Bob was mentioning. And I have conversations with Gartner clients every day about planning transformation in general, but talking about talent is actually one of my favorite topics to talk about. Now, why is this topic more relevant than ever? Where there is a lot of change in our environment these days. So technology has dramatically evolved over the past decade, even over the past 4 to 5 years. And there's increased investments in planning technology. So according to our research over the past 3 to 5 years, investments in planning technology has increased. Most organizations plan to continue that investment or increase it. And supply chain planning applications are considered the top most important technology to support overall supply chain transformation. Apart from that, there's increased data availability, and we are expected to use that data to improve planning. So the world is filled with data these days, and it's not just enough to simply look at that data, but how do we generate insights from it? There's also increased uncertainty. So demand variability has increased. Our supply chains are being disrupted more frequently, and those disruptions are coming with bigger impact. So that is making planning harder. And there's increased pressure for productivity. So we're expected to use more technology, use more data, manage that uncertainty, build better plans with less resources. All of these really requires an evolution of the role of the planner. The activities that a planner used to do in their day-to-day are changing dramatically. We've historically asked planners to generate plans. We now need them to move from being plan generators to being plan evaluators. Historically, it was more about gathering the data, modifying that data, gathering inputs, and building plans manually. Now, tools are out there to do that for planners, and the role of the planner is to evaluate multiple plans that are being created by tools so they can pick the right plan, the plan that most aligns to our strategic priorities, the plan that maybe generates the less risky environment for our organization. Apart from these, the role of the planner is moving from plan administration to plan orchestration. So we no longer need planners to be monitoring how execution is deviating from the plan manually or passing information across functions. We now need them to be ready to lead harder conversations across stakeholders across the value chain. So collaborating with customers and suppliers to make decisions when needed, to react to disruptions or to proactively mitigate the impact of risk. We also see a massive change in how we want the focus of our planners to shift. So we've historically asked our planners to focus on plan precision, and now we need them to focus on plan resilience. We've historically asked our planners to obsess about plan accuracy. So forecast accuracy being one of the metrics that most supply chains prioritize, or actually now need planners to embrace being wrong so they can actually challenge the assumptions that we use to build our plans. That would allow us to then understand risks and understand opportunities. And they now need to align stakeholders to put in place actions that help us mitigate the impact of risk or capitalize on opportunities so they can focus on building a plan that can withstand the impact of risk. That's what we would call the resilient plan, a plan that can be implemented and executed even in the face of disruption. Now, this evolution sounds really exciting. However, the pace of change is slower than what we would want. So planners are working outside the tool more than expected. Our 2023 Gartner Digital Adoption in Supply Chain Planning survey shows that in 31% of organizations, planners are creating order manually rather than using the tool at least 50% of their time. In 38% of organizations, planners are overriding the output of the tool due to new business insights at least 50% of the time. And in 43% of organizations, planners are working outside the tool to develop scenario plans at least 50% of the time. So how do we move planners from where they are to where we want them to be?
Christina, let's take a moment to poll the audience and find out where they are in some of this. This is a fascinating discussion already, but I'd like to ask the audience to choose one of the four next answers that most matches where you feel you are right now in your planning role. This question is as follows. What is your biggest challenge in evolving the role of the planner? Choose one of the following. Planners in my organization do not have the technical skills required. Planners in my organization do not demonstrate the leadership behaviors required. Planners in my organization do not want to change. And finally, planners struggle to perform their role due to resistance to change from other functions and leaders. Now, there may be a lot of overlap between among those four different choices, but just choose the one, please, that most approximates your situation right now in terms of what constitutes your biggest challenge in evolving the role of the planner. And we're going to take just a few more seconds for everybody to weigh in on this. And Christina will find out what is the state of the world in planning in our audience today. So let's see what everybody said. Okay, this is interesting. I'm going to read these out in order of most to least. 49% said planners struggle to perform their role due to resistance to change from other functions and leaders. 25% said planners in my organization do not have the technical skills required. 16% said planners in my organization do not demonstrate the leadership behaviors required. And finally, 10% said planners in my organization do not want to change. Christina, does this track with what you're seeing out there in the world?
It does. So we see all of those four reasons being challenges, right? So we hear all of those different reasons. So that's why today we're also going to talk about why you need to build your planners' willingness first. So you need to build your planners' willingness to change. You need to build your planners' ability to change, and you need to build your planners' confidence. So it's not enough to address just one of those barriers. So within those answers, we saw that for some organizations, one of those barriers might be the biggest driver, but there are all barriers for success. So you need to work on building your planners' ability, willingness, and confidence to actually succeed in evolving the role of your supply chain planners and stepping into the role that we want them to fulfill in the future. So today we're going to talk about building your planner's willingness to change through mapping and sharing a path forward. We'll talk about upskilling your planners, building their ability, both technical or leadership ability. And we'll talk about also building your planners' confidence through improving functional climate, which will help them deliver against that role, even if in the face of resistance to change from other functional leaders. So let's jump into the first section of today, which will talk about building that willingness. In many cases, I do hear, yeah, my planners do not want to change, or they're not ready for change, or they don't have the skills. However, our research shows that leadership is not being clear enough about how the roles are evolving. So according to our 2023 Gartner Employee and Consumer Attitudes Towards AI employee survey, only 44% of employees say they have complete visibility from leadership about new skills they might need to develop in response to AI. And even less than that, only 40% of organizations of employees tells us that they have complete visibility from leadership about how their roles are changing, stemming from deployment of technology. So to ensure that your planners can actually step into this future role, we need to start being clear with them about how the role is evolving, right? How that evolution of the role looks like. So you can use the 3 transitions to, in a simple and very straightforward way, communicate with your planners, how do we expect them to evolve? We've also done some research recently around the adoption of supply chain planning technologies, right? And one of the things that we learned is that a lot of organizations focus on technical training, so which are the buttons that you need to click, but organizations that are more advanced in their digital technology deployment are more likely to be helping their planners understand how their full role is evolving, right? How do we need them to step into different types of activities? How do they use it to output, to make decisions, and so on? So you must help your planners understand how their role is evolving and what they need to be successful in those roles, right? So planners need a new set of competencies. So competencies is what's required to perform effectively in a role. Competencies is a combination of knowledge. So many of our planners will need to acquire new knowledge to effectively perform their role. Many of our planners will need to learn new skills. So they will need to learn new procedures and techniques, especially techniques that can be applied to extract insights from data. And planners will need to also learn and exhibit new behaviors if we want them to influence stakeholders to make better decisions. So let's jump into a little bit more detail on what are the competencies of the future ready planner. So we'll talk a little bit about those knowledge, skills, and behaviors. Many times, the biggest question related to competencies that I get from our clients is, I need new digital skills, new digital competencies. Can you talk to me more about that? And that is true. As we deploy more technology, we need new digital competencies in many of our planners. We need many of our planners to learn and get some knowledge, especially around data science. So they need to understand new data concepts that maybe before were abstract to them or not known to them. As they learn and get that knowledge, they'll also become more data literate. So data literacy is the ability to read and communicate data in context. As we get more data, we need planners that can make sense of all of that new data that we're getting. And as they get that knowledge and build those skills, they'll become more digitally dexterous. So we want planners that are willing to adopt and adapt new and emerging technologies to deliver business outcomes. So the more that we deploy technology, these digital competencies are becoming more relevant and more important for our planners. However, as we evolve, we also need to consider what makes humans different. So a famous American math professor that teaches at Carnegie Mellon, and he's the coach for the US Math Olympiad team. Has a famous quote that I really like, and he said, "Being human will only be more important as AI becomes more powerful." So we don't expect technology to fully replace planners. What we need is planners that can work in partnership with technology. And to do that effectively, we need to understand what are those skills that differentiate the planner from the technology so they can partner effectively and leverage the strengths from each of those partners. So we also expect some of that functional knowledge to remain extremely valid and relevant for organizations and planners to remain, right? So planners will still need to fully understand planning foundations and end-to-end supply chain. If we want planners to be good plan evaluators, they need to understand if a risk occurs in one part of the supply chain, what does that mean for the rest of the value chain? We also need them to have some business acumen and financial acumen so they can pick the right plan. When the tool is generating a plan, they are able to then assess which plan is more risky, which plan better aligns to our business strategy and objectives. Right now, technology is able to calculate the financial impact of different plan choices, but it doesn't yet understand the nuance of why maybe at the beginning of the fiscal year, we prioritize a plan that drives and prioritizes revenue growth, but at the end of the fiscal year, we actually become more worried about protecting or optimizing for inventory performance or cash flow performance. So the planners with good functional and business acumen and financial acumen are able to pick the right plan that most aligns to our strategic priorities and objectives, depending on the time that we're standing in. Now, for planners to also be good plan orchestrators, they need to have good interpersonal skills and demonstrate interpersonal behaviors. So we need planners that are good communicators and good collaborators that are able to drive change within their functions so that we can actually leverage the new technology that we're deploying. We need these planners to become more risk tolerant if we want them to really focus on plan resilience versus plan precision. Storytelling is also becoming a behavior that I'm seeing emerge as an important behavior for planners. So data literacy talks about how do we put data into context, but planners also need to convince stakeholders to actually make data-driven decisions. So they have to find ways to effectively tell stories with data if we want to drive organizations to build better plans that are data-driven. And lastly, we also need planners that have stronger cognitive skills. So planners that are problem solvers, critical thinkers, and creative thinkers, if we want them to succeed in solving for the challenges that the future is probably going to deliver at us. Now, I know this sounds like a lot. I would not expect all of your planners in your organization to master all of these skills. What we expect is you need all of these competencies in your planning team, but the level of mastery will be different for different specific planning roles. Now, I do want to highlight one among all of these. This competency framework is developed based on the state of the world today and the state of technology today, right? So adaptability remains one of the key behaviors that we expect as technology continues to evolve, as the world continues to evolve, our supply chains continue to evolve. We need planners to be adaptable as new competencies will likely emerge over time. So the first step into enabling your planners into stepping into the future role is mapping their role evolution and the required competencies and sharing that path forward to build willingness to change. So now we
get ready for the Gartner Supply Chain Planning Summit coming up December 3rd through 4th, 2024 in Denver, Colorado, where a lot of the things that Christina is talking about today will be heard over those 2 days. You're going to learn all about the supply chain planning landscape. It demands much more than forecast accuracy. There'll be a lot of great content, a lot of great Gartner experts to talk about all these things. We look forward to seeing you in Denver. To learn more, go to gartner.com/US/supply chain planning. Anaplan is a leading provider of enterprise cloud software. empowering organizations across industries to see, plan, and lead better business outcomes. Our connected planning platform enables leaders to align their strategic objectives and resources, make bolder decisions, and drive faster results. At Anaplan, we're committed to delivering continuous innovation and an exceptional customer experience while fostering a culture of inclusivity and accountability. For more information, go to www.anaplan.com.
So we've talked about building our planners' willingness. Now we'd move into building their ability. So many of you mentioned, some of your planners don't have the technical skills required, and then some others mentioned some of my planners do not have the leadership skills required. So we need to upskill and reskill our planners to succeed in this future role. Now, formal training can help build knowledge. So formal training goes a long way in building knowledge that is required for the planners. Many organizations are deploying formal training around digital skills, so deploying training around data concepts, analytics concepts, technology concepts, right? So our planners can understand what AI is and what it's not, what is the power of different technologies. There's different strategies to execute formal training. So some organizations are building internal learning academies. Some organizations are partnering with education institutions. Some organizations are paying for some certifications for their planners. So to build some of that foundational planning training, they're paying for APICS or CPSM certifications. And some organizations are also leveraging external vendors, so paying for memberships to LinkedIn Learning or Coursera for their planners so they can access formal training in many different ways. Now, we know that formal training only accounts for about 10% of our learning. We must provide planners also with other types of opportunities to embed that learning. So research shows that only 10% of our learnings occur through formal training. About 20% of our learnings actually occurs through relationships, through other people, and 70% of our learnings occurs by doing. So we doing new things, it's necessary for us to learn new things. So you must embed relationship-based learning and experiential learning opportunities for your planners to actually develop some of those technical and leadership skills. So let's talk about some examples of experiential learning opportunities. There are some opportunities to offer in-role experiences to your planners so they develop some of the skills again while they are performing that job. One example is access to best practice, right? So you might have a planner maybe shadowing a planner in a different planning function so they learn how the other planning processes occur, or you have a planner shadowing a planner in a different market or business unit. So we learn from a planner that does their job more effectively. I've also seen you can have planners maybe shadow a commercial leader or a finance leader so they can build some of that business and commercial acumen that is needed. You can also expose your planners to change and adversity to build some leadership skills. So maybe a planner can be the leader for a disruption respond team that needs to be created when you face a new disruption over the next few months. That will help them maybe manage change, influence stakeholders, and some of the other softer leadership skills that they need to develop. You can also expose them to challenging relationships, so how they get better at working with some of the stakeholders with whom historically they maybe haven't been the best at managing that relationship. You can also expose your planners to persuading and teaching. So as your planning team maybe changes or evolves, you can assign a planner to be a mentor for a new planner in the team, or you can assign them to develop formal training for some particular processes for either new planners, or even if we think about an S&OP process, maybe a planner can become responsible for training newcomers to the company in commercial or finance as they jump into being participants of your planning process. So exposing to that kind of teaching role can also help them some of the leadership skills that they need. And also making difficult decisions, right? So we need to help them become more comfortable making hard decisions. So maybe we can ask them to make a decision that it's outside their scope, or above a typical decision that a leader would take from them. We can maybe expose them to that risk so they learn from that experience. You can also put your planners in outside role experiential learning opportunities. So many organizations build rotational programs. So a planner can go into multiple rotations to better understand how the end-to-end supply chain works. Or other types are secondments, right? So if we look at planners that are taking a leave of absence, for example, how do we see that as an opportunity to train a different planner in that particular skill rather than look at it as maybe a headache? And lastly, many organizations are going through special projects as we deploy technology. We're seeing many project roles or change roles emerging as temporary roles in organizations. So potentially some of your planners can step into those roles to develop some of the leadership skills that they require, some project management skills or leadership skills or change skills that will then make them better equipped to come back into the planning role after they do those outside roles opportunities. Apart from those experiential learning opportunities, again, we hope that you invest in relationship-based learning strategies. So relationship-based mean you leverage the power of we, right? So you have to match people together and they will do the rest of the job for you. Some of the examples of these types of learning strategies are things like communities of practice. So if we have planners that are spread across the world, how do we put them together in maybe a monthly call, or do we create a chat or a team, a virtual team communication where they can talk to each other. They can teach each other how to use the new tool. They can talk to each other when they're running into an issue with the generation of a report, or when they're struggling to influence a stakeholder. So how do we connect planners in the same role or in similar roles to learn from each other and support each other through their change journey or leadership journey? Many organizations also deploy coaching programs or mentoring programs. So these are all where we tag a planner with another stakeholder that can coach them. Coaching teams are more formal approaches where we have a specific goal in mind. So this is an example of maybe a leader that attends your S&OP meetings can coach your planner. So at the end of each meeting, they can meet together and say, and the coach can give feedback to the planner and saying how they lead the conversation. Mentoring is more of an unstructured approach, so it doesn't have an end goal, but it's a leadership person that can accompany the planners through career choices, career discussions, and really development discussions in general. Another strategy that is emerging is network to support knowledge exchange. So many organizations are leveraging technology to facilitate connecting people. We in Gartner, for example, have something called a connections marketplace. This is a website where any employee can go in and offer a skill. So I can say, I'm actually really good at, at planning. I'm really good at presenting. I'm really good at AI. And any employee can also go and search for a skill. So I can go in and say, I actually want to learn about negotiation, or I want to learn about, HR. I want to learn about whatever. And then the tool would match people together. So it simply connects someone that has a skill with someone that needs a skill, and then they would do the rest by themselves. Now, so you need to invest in formal training, relationship-based learning, and experiential learning opportunities. Many of our clients tell me, Christina, this sounds great, but I don't have time for these. I need those skills built right now. Now, I know that that might sound scary, but it might be a good thing. And I'll tell you why through an example. So CBS identify what they call performance driving learning moments. So they discovered that when the learning was separated or distanced from the time when that learning needed to be applied, the effectiveness of the learning strategy was pretty low. So basically, when the employee is executing the training, they don't understand or can't put that training into context or how to use it. Now, when it's time to actually use that, they have forgotten what they learned 6 months ago. So they discover that by connecting the moment of training with the moment of need, the training effectiveness was really high. So again, the fact that you need all of the skills today is actually a good thing, because it means that you can teach the skills to the planner, and the planner can put them in practice right away, which means that that training will be embedded, or it's more likely to successfully embed that into their day-to-day. So recognize that if you need those skills right now, it is then the great time or the best time to actually get your planners to upskill and teach them those. So upskilling your planners require experiential learning and relationship-based learning alongside formal training.
Today's webinar is sponsored by Gains, where we explore cutting-edge supply chain planning. Leveraging decision engineering principles, the Gains AI-powered cloud platform optimizes supply chain decisions from strategic operations planning through automated reordering, engineered for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Gains' Halo 360 degrees decision engineering and orchestration platform transcends traditional ERP systems, enhancing supply chain performance, profitability, and customer confidence. Discover how Gains empowers businesses to achieve rapid results with optimal speed and scalability. Visit gainsystems.com. Zebra Technologies provides the solutions and expertise to help companies engage associates, optimize inventory, and elevate customer experience. Our award-winning offering spans a $1 billion work cloud software portfolio to innovations in robotics, machine vision, automation, and digital decisioning, all backed by a 50-year-plus legacy in hardware. Zebra's customers include over 80% of the Fortune 500. Our Work Cloud Demand Intelligence Suite will unlock the potential of data, helping retailers and CPG companies to drive smarter decisions with intelligent forecasting and analysis. Visit www.zebra.com.
Lastly, when we feel our planners' willingness and ability, we need to focus on building their confidence. So I do hear from a lot of our clients sometimes, my planners don't want to change, or we've upskilled them, we've reskilled them, we've shared the path forward, and they still not changing. Now, when leaders see that, they say, my planners do not demonstrate these strategic behaviors, it must be because they lack the skills. So we keep going back to investing in learning and development. So they keep asking questions about how do I upskill and reskill? My programs are not working. But sometimes they're missing part of the puzzle. What if I tell you that when planners are not demonstrating strategic behaviors, it might be for another reason? A lot of leaders expect their planners to change. Yet, according to our research, only 36% of planners strongly agree that management encourages them to try new things and innovate in the tool. So we as leaders, we want our planners to try new things. We want them to use new tools. We want them to embrace using emerging technologies. Yet the planners are receiving mixed signals about the ability that they have to actually try new things in the tool and to make mistakes, because when we're trying new things, we're always afraid of making mistakes. If we don't provide a safe environment for those planners to feel like they can make mistakes without having consequences, then they're not going to be willing to test or try new things. They're not going to have the confidence of saying, I want to try this new process, this new report, this new tool, because if I make a mistake, I know my management will see it as an opportunity for learning. So where planners are not demonstrating strategic behavior, it might be that we're not giving them the opportunity to deploy those skills, or we're not giving them the space to feel safe to try these new skills and learn new things. So we must also invest in improving functional climate for our planners to feel confident in developing the new skills and trying new things. Functional climate is the environment in which employees perform their work, right? It's composed of roles and policies, rewards and recognition, and manager behavior. You must build the right functional climate for planners to feel confident in deploying these new skills. And I'll give you a few examples. So roles and policies. Many organizations are automating manual tasks, and as they do so, they're finding opportunities to realign roles based on employee experiences and benefits, right? So what employees can do, what they like doing the most, that will typically drive their motivation up and their confidence and their willingness to learn new things. Many organizations are also designing more flexible roles so that we can dedicate part of the role to a particular project that helps them develop a new competency. You must also think about rewards and recognition. You must avoid the urge to reward firefighting. We all want planners to spend more time planning, yet what we see is that planners receive the wildest recognition when they firefight, which is a lack of planning. So you must stop rewarding the hero of the week because we did everything at last minute to solve an issue or a risk. We must reward planners for planning behaviors. We also see many organizations implementing adoption metrics as a way to encourage adoption of new tools and systems. And I would also encourage you to consider a peer-nominated recognition program. So that would allow you to see what's happening when you're not in the room. So what we see is leaders want planners to exhibit leadership skills and behaviors, but they're taking over all of the hard conversations and alternatives for planners to actually exhibit those. So you want to be able to see what happens when you're not in the room. And implementing a peer-nominated program can do that for you. So you can see who's the planner that steps up when you're not in the meeting, when you're not in place to support other planners. And lastly, we must refocus manager behavior from micromanaging and taking the hard conversations into enabling. They must focus on building that safe environment, giving feedback to planners so they can continue to grow and learn, and taking, again, mistakes as learning opportunities and opportunities for reflection rather than building a fear environment where planners don't feel confident to evolve. So you must provide the opportunities for your planners to deploy and improve their skills. This change takes a journey, but many organizations are making progress already. I want to quickly take you through a last example of an organization that is making good progress, and that's Schneider Electric. They implemented what they call an open talent market, which is it's a web-based platform that uses AI technology to match internal talent with opportunities. So basically, in that platform, employees can get suggestion on full-time roles or career moves. When a role opens up, it might send a message to good candidates. It offers also suggestions for part-time projects or assignments. It offers mentoring opportunities, and it offers suggestions on the learning platform systems. So as you can see, they're doing formal training, experiential learning, relationship-based training. They're taking all of the learning strategies that are required and putting them in a single platform that offers suggestions for employees. Now, when they deployed these, they recognized that they also needed to change the culture for these to be successful. So they decided that all positions and projects had to be posted, no assignments on the background. They removed the time requirement, so it's no longer needed that you have 5 years in supply chain to apply to this new role. Manager approval is not required to apply to anything, and they redesign roles to ensure that every employee in the company can dedicate 10 to 15% of their time to projects outside their role. So your current role accounts for about 85 to 90% of your workload. 10% is always dedicated to a project, which allows them to always be enforcing new skills through experiential learning opportunities. So by doing all of these projects, all of their employees are getting new skills. So you are now ready to empower tomorrow planners. You must map and communicate your role changes and competencies to build willing planners. You must upskill your planners with experiential and relationship-based learning to have capable planners. And you must improve functional climate to ensure that you have confident planners that can step into their new role.
Thanks very much for that great presentation, Christina. At this point, let's move into the panel discussion portion of our presentation, in which I have the privilege of being able to ask you some questions, after which we will then bring in the audience for their own questions. But let me start with this, Christina. Do you foresee that the role of the planner will eventually be eliminated and replaced by technology?
I get this question every once in a while, and the simple answer is no, I don't expect. We do expect the role of the planner to evolve, so it's shifting from some of the activities that they used to do to the activities that they now need to do, and potentially in the future they might look slightly different, but I don't expect planners to be completely replaced by technology. Again, what we see is technology can calculate a lot of the financial impact and build good plans, but it takes some nuance to pick the right plan to ensure which is the plan that best aligned to business strategy. And we haven't seen technology also being able to align all of the cross-functional stakeholders into a single plan.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't foresee the full elimination of the planner role. We foresee a continuous evolution of it, but not an elimination.
Good, because you're telling us all these new qualities that a planner has to have. It would be awfully interesting if then we said, well, you're not going to be any planners at all anyway, so what does it matter? So I
Yeah.
appreciate you being able to assure us that the human will still have a role going forward. So, Christina, generative AI, Gen AI, of course, is the big news in AI today. How will Gen AI impact the competency framework that you shared with us today?
We do expect some changes to that, as I said, that's developed on the state of the world today. But Gen AI so far is proving to help deliver employee productivity benefits so far. So it's helping also planning communities out there to be more effective. But for Gen AI to provide value, you need planners that can ask the right question and use those tools effectively. So right now, we still expect those planners to require all of the competencies that we talked about. A new emerging tool competency might be prompting, right? So how do we get planners to get better at prompting Gen AI to get the right questions?
Mm.
But apart from that, Gen AI has a lot of potential for employee productivity. We haven't seen as yet the potential of Gen AI in actually doing planning, which is a different other AI techniques are driving value in doing planning, but so far
Mm.
not Gen AI.
Now, there's been a lot of churn in labor these days in organizations, finding the right labor, keeping the right labor. How do you manage a program that you've described to us today in a high team rotation environment, which of course maybe is just about every environment these days?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple of things that can help. One, the more that you have a strong program to develop people, that can also be a catch for people, right? Our research suggests that people are interested in pay, but actually the ability to develop within a company is one of the biggest drivers of retention too. So the more that you reinforce these programs, it will actually serve as a retention strategy for you. We also see that as employees get new skills, they can also stay within the company, and that you won't lose that knowledge completely. So I know we always want the planners to stay there because that adds value to us, but as long as they stay within the company, we would see that as a win.
Mm-hmm. Christina, earlier you referred to the importance of resilience over accuracy, and I want to just ask you one more aspect of resilience, and that is the question of the shrinking planning horizon. That you have to do more and more short-term planning and adjustment to what is actually happening in the marketplace. Could you talk a little bit about the challenge of having to replan before planning actually becomes execution, and how much shorter are the horizons now than they used to be?
Well, I think it's an interesting duality, right? So we do see organizations having to replan more frequently, but we actually see lead times extending. So the fact that lead times are extending actually means that you have to plan for a further horizon, because some of the planning decisions have to be made earlier, right? So we like to think about again, having the ability to react to disruption very fast. And that is true. Most organizations are having to replan more frequently. But I actually see that you have resiliency strategies also mean that you have to plan more. So organizations that are most successful are not the ones that have simply the best ability to execute. They're also the ones that are doing more planning for the midterm. So they're planning for more scenarios. They're more likely to be identifying more risks, more opportunities. We can think through what they mean and then put in place actions to handle those risks or those opportunities. So we actually see that the level of disruption and uncertainty requires more planning rather than less planning.
At this point, I'd like to bring the audience in. We've been asking you all along to submit your questions by clicking on that Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. There are indeed some audience questions already coming in, but even as Christina answers what we have already got, you're certainly welcome and encouraged to continue to submit your questions, and we'll get to as many of those as we can, time permitting. Let me start with this one, Christina. The question is, are these strategies driven by the HR function? We talked a little bit about that just now. And what is the role of the supply chain planning leader in this regard?
Many organizations have strong HR functions that are driving some of these. And if that's your case, then you should definitely leverage that. But we do see that the planning leaders are taking more within their functions, right? So if this is a big challenge for you, then you must You must take a bigger role in driving that agenda for you. And you might also start smaller. So when I talk about experiential learning opportunities, for example, there's many structured ways to do that, but there's also informal ways to do that, right? You always are doing some level of change in your supply chain planning. You can think about any of those as opportunities for developing your planners. So I talk to clients all the time where you're running a segmentation analysis, you are implementing a new report, you are, bringing new, you're starting collaboration with a customer or with a supplier. All of those can be conceived as smaller projects that can serve as development opportunities. So rather than, if you have the full infrastructure, obviously go for it and leverage HR. If you don't, you can still start small. And again, it's about changing your shift from learning is about always a structural approach to how we leverage everything that we do every day and consider that a learning opportunity.
Another question about people and skills. What is the best way to deliver formal training?
We get the question a lot, and there's not a single way. We see that organizations take different approaches. But according to our research, and we did some research around adoption, and that included how are you delivering training for your teams. And we found that delivering shorter training followed by a specific activity to implement that training is the most effective. So again, yes, you deliver some formal training, but it ideally, if you want that to be effective, you want to follow it with the ability to implement that training or execute that training experience, right? So it's followed by a particular activity where you can practice that learning, and that highly increases the effectiveness of the training that you're delivering.
Another follow-up on that one. Questioner wants to know, for a company with no talent program, where should we start?
I think I would recommend that you start by building the functional expertise. You can potentially do that through external certifications. You can do that through rotational programs inside planning. And if you're the planning leader, you can control that. Even if it's a rotational program inside planning, you can move people around or consider, for example, secondments as an opportunity for development. So again, I think it's a shift of mindset from all of the learning it needs to be taken by HR to how do we take any opportunity as an opportunity for learning and development. I think just making that shift will help you find that in your day-to-day, there are opportunities to train and develop your planners.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are a lot of questions coming in about the people aspect of this. It's interesting. This questioner wants to know, can you explore more how we can improve our skills and influence and communication for planners within an organization, I'm guessing? And what would you say about that?
I mean, there's definitely some training that you can execute in terms of how to communicate, but there's also many strategies that you can teach planners, right? Even in an SNOP environment, I talked a lot to clients about using a technique called SCAR. So when you're communicating, you also always think about the situation, the complication, the action, and the results, right? So whenever you're going to communicate something, don't just communicate the situation. Always think about what's the complication? So why should your stakeholders care about the situation that you're explaining? What are our possible actions? What can we do about it? And what will be the result if we implement those actions? So there are simple techniques that you can use to communicate, to improve the communication of your planners as they're always thinking about the stakeholders that they're talking to. And always, I would say, using data. Data is the biggest tool that planners have to face the stakeholders. Again, many times planners are facing much senior stakeholders, and data is a tool that they have to get to their level, right? So it's not a conversation between me and you. It's not a discussion, me against you. It's us looking at the data. So I would say always use the data to empower your planners to face some of those hard conversations.
This question wants to know, what is the role of business strategy when it comes to assessments in the development of planners? It says, how does it relate to policy assessments? What can organizations do to ensure that these two kinds of assessments, I guess planning and business overall greater business policy to ensure that these two kinds of assessments interrelate? I guess we're talking about kind of an organizational communication and breaking down silos kind of question here. Can you speak to that?
So when I think about business strategy, should influence your planning decisions, right? When we're making planning decisions, you're making decisions about how are you going to utilize the company's resources, and you're making decisions about what's your risk tolerance. So for example, when you're deciding how much are we going to buffer in capacity, how much are we going to buffer in inventory, how much are we going to put in safety stock, all of that should be connected to business strategy, because your business strategy is how you want to win in the marketplace. So a company, for example, that which value proposition is being the lowest cost alternative in the market should make different planning decisions that a company which value proposition is, being the best service out there. So if it's the best service, then you're going to put more buffers in capacity, more buffers in inventory. If you want to be the lowest cost, you want to utilize your capacity a little bit more. So yes, there should be a strong connection between business strategy and planning decisions, which means that your planners need to understand that business strategy. I think we sometimes look at planners as kind of a very junior employee that doesn't need as much context. The decisions that they make are typically very important. So we need to empower them to make better decisions through better understanding of that business strategy.
Mm-hmm. This questioner is saying nowadays we're having challenges with regards to resource planning. Who isn't? What are your thoughts in buyer/planner roles where a person can perform both roles? Maybe they're talking about a smaller organization where that is possible. Are there any pros and cons you foresee if an organization implements this?
So we see that approach in some industries. In some industries, it's a little bit more common than others. I would say it's more common in industries that have external manufacturing partners. So again, you don't necessarily own the manufacturing facilities. You work through external partners. It's a little bit more common to have what we would call a planner-buyer role. In general, we would see that when you have narrower roles, so roles that are specific to a smaller set of activities, it's more likely that you build standardization and expertise. If you're going for wider roles, typically you're trying to drive agility, but then you risk standardization. So you have to pick what's best for your organization right now. Typically in early stages, I would advise organizations to try narrower roles to build expertise and standardization. Then you start deploying technology, which allows you to go for wider roles and drive more agility. But once you already have the expertise and the standards in place. Mm-hmm. Again, org decisions are always very nuanced. So there's not a single way of organizing. But we do see those type of roles working better in some industries and environments.
This questioner is trying to digest everything you've told us today and wants to know how I can use that information. If it can only do one thing, the questioner asks, right now, what would that be?
I think that one thing that I would do is prioritize functional knowledge and process foundational training. I think many organizations are shifting to, let's build all of the digital competencies, let's go into the digital skills. If you don't have the foundational supply chain knowledge, it's hard for planners to make sense of everything that technology offers. So I would still prioritize the functional knowledge, to be quite honest.
Mm-hmm. Good start. Okay. Well, unfortunately, I have the deliverer of bad news here, and that is that we're almost out of time for this great presentation. I'd love to hear more from Christina, but we are running up against our limits. We do have time, Christina, for one final question. It's kind of a follow-up on the one you just asked. So here it is. We've talked just now about immediate action. What about the future? What should I, a listener, in the audience, be doing in the next, say, 3 weeks and in the next 3 months plus?
Well, I'm glad that you asked that question, Bob. In preparation for this webinar, I planned a small follow-up for our attendees to do. So within the next 3 weeks, I would encourage you to assess your current state, understand the role of your planners today, define a vision of how that future planner looks for you, and create a community of practice to start the sharing between planners. And over the next 3 months, I would encourage you to share that vision with planners. So again, we start building that willingness through sharing that vision and communicating how they add value in the future. Identify in-role experiential learning opportunities. Think about any project that you're running, smaller projects like implementing a new report. they also work. It's just an opportunity for planners to do something slightly different than what they do in their day-to-day. Train your managers to move them from micromanaging to coaching and mentoring, and design a peer nominated recognition program so you can start recognizing the good behaviors or the planning behaviors that we want to continue to reinforce.
That's an awful lot to take in for now and the future. But fortunately, audience, you don't have to memorize what Christina just said, as well as all of the rich content of this presentation, because we will be giving you an on-demand link to the show when it's over, so you can go back and review just what Christina was telling us here about the role of the planner going forward. It's been a great presentation. Thank you so much, Christina Carvalho, for that. And audience, thank you for your participation as well. But hey, again, do not forget the Gartner Supply Chain Planning Summit, coming up December 3rd through 4th, 2024 at the Gaylord Rockies Resort and Convention Center in Denver, Colorado. Who should attend? Well, who shouldn't? Heads of supply chain planning, S&OP, integrated business planning leaders, heads of demand planning, and supply and inventory planning leaders. You'll note there are 3 tracks there with a lot of great content to build on what you heard from Christina today. Learn more from gartner.com/US/supply chain planning. Once again, Christina, thank you so much for your insights into this. And audience, thank you for your participation. And everybody, have a great day.